Gettysburg, Pennsylvania is practically synonymous with ghosts and hauntings. There's even been a few reported Bigfoot sightings in the area, but there's also been a number of strange craft reported to be hovering over the town and battlefield. So this week, I'm looking at some really perplexing UFO sightings that have occurred over the town. Will affixing bayonets keep the aliens away? Stay tuned and find out.
Ghosts surround you everywhere. Wait until you meet them there. In my dreams, I see your path. You glanced at me and then feedback.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I'm doing a sort of a weird mashup. It's a little bit weird. I love Gettysburg, and if you're into the paranormal, you know that Gettysburg is very famous for its haunted locations, its ghost stories, ghost tours. It's a very paranormal heavy town, and people think this because of the battle and all the death that happened there, and destruction and tragedy and negative emotions. I've actually done an episode on Bigfoot sightings in the area as well. And even in town, you can find Bigfoot shirts that reference Gettysburg. I've actually worn a few on the show before, and I've mentioned them. But what you don't really hear too much of the UFO sightings around Gettysburg. Everyone's sort of laser focused on the ghosts and the haunted locations, which I get. But there was a surprising amount of UFO sightings over the town, and I wanted to discuss some of those tonight. If you've watched the show before, you know I love Gettysburg. I'm wearing my American Battlefield Trust hat here tonight. So let's get into some UFO sightings over the town, over the battlefield, and the surrounding areas, because nobody ever really talks about UFOs in Gettysburg. So I've done a lot of ghost stories in Gettysburg episodes, I think 3 or 4 now, but wanted to focus on UFOs. So let's get to some UFO sightings. All right, so this first sighting is really sort of intriguing. It comes to us from July 15th of 2012, about 8 p.m. at night. A triangular sort of shaped object, and the witness says it was a delta wing with no lights, walnut-shaped pod on the underside with a rectangular row of ports with a greenish, grayish glow. So very unusual. We hear about like acorn-shaped UFOs. You hear about triangular, the delta wing, the boomerang. This almost sounds like all of those things in one. So let's get into this story. This incident happened on a Thursday evening in mid to late July 2012. I was wheeling the trash out to the end of the driveway for the Friday morning pickup when I looked up and noticed a light in the northern horizon. At first, I thought this was a landing light of a craft coming into Harrisburg. Then I realized the bearing of this craft was southerly, and if the craft was moving easterly or northerly to land at Harrisburg, I would not be able to see the light. So already he's trying to figure out what this is, and he's saying, this doesn't really make sense. Realizing that Washington was too far south for the landing light to be activated, my attention was now focused on this light. The light was queer in that it was not as bright as landing lights, which I have witnessed before, and oddly, there was no beam projecting from the light and no streaking emanating about the light, which would normally be noticed with a bright light in the sky. It was like a dull light, for lack of a better explanation. So he's trying to figure this out in his mind as what this is. He's thinking it's a plane, but then he's like, this doesn't really look like the planes I normally see here. So he continues, I waited for at least 5 minutes for whatever this light was coming from to pass over. What passed was not was expected. It was a simple delta wing craft with an estimated length of 300 feet and an estimated width at the base of 200 feet, traveling at an estimated height of 1,000 feet. The course of travel was south by southwest, and it was passing over our house and our neighbor's house to the right, with the better part over our neighbor's house, allowing me to get a better perspective of the craft. There was absolutely no noise. There were no markings. The color was of a very dull sheen. The craft was moving so slowly I could not estimate the speed. So here you have something very big, long wingspan, no markings, no sound, moving very slowly. It doesn't make sense. You'd think something that big would be making noise or moving quickly. Interesting. So they continue. As the craft passed over, the view of the underside was unobstructed. Since it was at dusk, but not dark, so he's got a little bit of light, I could see what is best described as a half walnut pod on the underside with an estimated length of 100 feet. On the side of the pod was a horizontal single row of what I first thought appeared like rectangular shaped windows, but soon realized were not windows. Emanating from each rectangular shape was a grayish greenish cast with an undulating darker gray shadow in the center. It almost sounds like thrusters or engines of some sort. Very strange, but they're greenish gray. It's an interesting way of describing it. As the craft passed over and the back of the craft was coming into view, I realized there were no other lights on the craft and no conventional tail section. I estimate the depth of the pod at maybe 20 to 30 feet and the depth of the main body also at 20 to 30 feet. I use the word estimate throughout this explanation as my perspective is based on viewing conventional craft. So he's trying to line this up with other aircraft that he's familiar with. This craft could have been considerably larger, but my senses were at approximately in my noted dimensions. So we'll get back to that. I was not frightened. I was intrigued, almost mesmerized by the craft. As the craft passed, I briefly remember thinking if this was the Aurora program. It was based on no known technology of today. Beyond relating my observations to my wife in a rather animated manner, I have related very little to very few. The part which bothers me the most is the clarity of this, my observation, and the fact that I can't seem to stop thinking about it. So a very interesting experience here. And it does sound a little bit like the Aurora project, but that I think turned into other things. And it almost sounds like a stealth bomber. And that's kind of the impression I was getting when he's describing this thing, just like almost like a large flying wing, no tail assembly to it, no stabilizing tail, and an almost like acorn shape underneath. And you know, if you've seen a stealth bomber, I'll throw a photo up here. There's kind of this sort of teardrop shape to the fuselage, and then the wings spread out. So that's almost what it sounds like. But again, this is not that long. You know, if this was the mid 80s, I'd say, yeah, maybe he saw a stealth bomber. But in 2012, everybody knows what a stealth bomber, stealth fighter looks like. Also, a stealth bomber is not quiet, and they don't move slowly. They need to retain a certain amount of speed to stay airborne, and they're dark. And he's saying that it wasn't reflective. It was a sort of dull finish on it, which does sound like stealth technology, but it doesn't sound like anything that we know of right now. So the Aurora project, possibly, but this thing is moving slow. It's making no sound. Definitely a UFO, unidentified, flying, and it's an object. I'm not saying it's alien. I'm not saying it's extraterrestrial or from another dimension. Probably military. But it's interesting. He's seeing this at dusk. It's not quite fully dark yet. It's this long wing with a walnut-shaped pod on the underside, greenish glow coming from them. It just sounds very bizarre. And again, I always wonder why, if the military is testing these things, why do they do it over these residential areas where people are bound to see them? People look out the windows, they go out at night, they sit on the back deck and have a smoke, they bring their trash out. So just very, very interesting sighting. And this is just like a very unique sort of craft. I've never really, like I said, it's got components of different ones. There was the Kecksburg UFO, which sounded like an acorn. You have the Hudson Valley UFO flap, which had like these flying wings or triangles or boomerang shapes. And this just kind of sounds like a mishmash of those. So very cool sighting. Again, I wish they would say where in Gettysburg. This just says Gettysburg. So it could be in the town, it could be in the outskirts. A lot of people who are pretty far from Gettysburg will still consider themselves in Gettysburg. So very interesting, but a really cool Gettysburg UFO sighting. So let me know what you guys think of this one. All right, story number 2. This is another like really sort of bizarre sounding craft, and it's not just the typical saucer, triangle, cigar shape that we typically hear. This one is from March 13th of 2005, about 10 p.m., Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Diamond shaped with lights on the object, and they say it was a wingless oblong diamond craft, 3 close lights near the rear. I am a college graduate that has recently relocated to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to fulfill an employment opportunity. Good for you, dude. I'm very jealous. I was changing a light bulb on an outside light of my residence. I observed an aircraft in the distance traveling on a course that I have observed many commercial aircraft to take in an eastern to western fashion. My location was north of the object's flight trajectory. So he's seeing this thing, again, probably at first thinking it's a plane. I continued to screw the light housing back on and was anxious to get inside out of the cold. It's March, and down there it can get very chilly. As I stepped down from the task, I noticed that the object that I previously observed was making a wide turn and was approaching a northern direction. The craft was approximately 1 to 2 miles south of my location. What really grabbed my attention was the wingspan of the craft. It was low to the ground and had a truly wide wingspan. So it sounds very similar to this previous story of just a wide wingspan, low to the ground. Again, 1,000 feet sounds high, but you realize most airplanes are above 30,000 feet when they're cruising, and even if they're coming in for a landing, they don't hit 1,000 feet until very close to the airport. uh, there was no noise at this time, and the aircraft reminded me of a glider. So if you've ever seen a glider, the hang glider that people use, it's again sort of boomerang shaped, sounds very similar to the previous story. I stood fixated on the object and was amazed as it passed over, directly over myself and the house. So again, similar to the last story, just passing right over the house. I could see that there were no wings protruding outward at any part of the craft. The craft was a continuous, solid diamond shaped, with the tail longer than the front. It looked like a giant kite. So, yeah, diamond shaped, almost like a kite shaped. The craft was noisy as it passed over, but I could not recognize what its propulsion system was. It was not a prop sound like a propeller, and it was not a turbine sound like you'd hear on a commercial airliner or jet. The object had three dim white circular lights 3/4 to the rear. There was a bright headlight or searchlight up on the front tip, red and blue beacons on the sides, and a blinking white beacon on the tail. As the craft passed over, I ran into the house to get my girlfriend and have her take a look. By the time we were back outside, about 30 seconds, the craft was on the northwestern horizon and looked like a conventional aircraft. My assumption of my sighting was a secret military craft or extraterrestrial. So here's another one that doesn't sort of fit into the traditional UFO categories of, saucer, triangle, cigar shape. It's a kite shape. At first he's seeing this and it almost sounds like a glider. And then I guess he's seeing more of it. And then it's like, this is kite shaped. And the tail is longer. So in the direction it's moving, it's not even like aerodynamic. You'd think the long, thinner tail section would be the front and the wider section would be the back, but this seems to be the opposite. The red and the blue beacons on the sides, that almost sounds like navigation lights. Airplanes have the red and the green, but he's saying this is red and blue. A blinking white light on the tail. So it sounds similar to typical aircraft lights. But again, this is somebody, I think anybody, like I say in the Bigfoot episodes, people know what bears look like. People know what airplanes look like. And yes, do people misconstrue airplanes as UFOs? All the time? People will see a light and they say, oh, it's not moving, and it's just an airplane coming at you. It's the headlight, and there's so many instances of this where people see airplanes or drones or even just stars and they think they're seeing a UFO, and we'll get to stars later. But I think most people know what a conventional aircraft looks like, especially when you're seeing it for a long time. If it's passing right overhead, this is not something in the distance where you're not getting a good look. And again, people will see these things and say, oh my God, it's a UFO, because they're seeing it from miles away and it's just a light and it's acting weird. But here's another person who's seeing this thing over their house. They're getting a good look at it. It's making a noise. But he's saying it's not a propeller, it's not a turbine, it's not something he recognized. And you'd think if a plane, again, if a large plane goes over your house, the house is going to shake. Those turbines make a very distinct sound. So it's one of these things where I don't know what to make of this. The lights sound a little conventional. So I do like that he says maybe this is a military aircraft, because very possibly, maybe he's mistaking the green for blue because of the atmospheric conditions. Who knows? But very possibly secret military. But again, I'm calling this one a UFO. It's unidentified. It's flying. It's an object. Doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. But I have no idea what it is. If you have any ideas, let me know down below. But I thought this was another really cool and very unique sighting for Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. All right, third story comes to us from September 28th, 2008, about 9 p.m. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This was a bright white light at night. Looked up and saw an unusually bright white light. It was much brighter than all the other stars, etc. At first, I had the unusual sensation that all the stars were moving while this object remained still. So when you look up at the night sky and you focus on something, the stars can start moving around. They're not actually moving. It's just how our brains perceive things. But if you focus on one star, you can go try this. The other stars will start looking like they're moving, and it's just psychological effect. Uh, but he continues, it was as bright as a car headlight in the sky, but not clear light, simply white. I always look for flashing lights, and this had none. Also, no noise, dead silent. So again, he's trying to, or she's trying to figure out, uh, is this an airplane? Is this a star? Uh, where's the noise? Is this a helicopter? Is this a jet? Dead silent, no noise, no flashing lights. And most conventional aircraft have the wing lights, red and green. It moved fairly slowly to the north for about a minute or so, seemingly getting farther away, as if gaining altitude. All of a sudden, it dimmed to the point that I could only locate it with my peripheral vision. It stayed on its path, but was barely visible. After another few seconds, I lost it in the very clear night sky. My thought is that before I noticed it, it must have been lower and directly over my house. Scary. This is the second possible sighting of my life, with about 18 years in between. The older was a very different scenario and apparently different type of craft. And they don't go into detail here. I wish they had. I'm very open-minded, but not stupidly so. There may be some explanation for what I saw, but it could have been otherworldly as well. Just kind of weird. So he's leaving it open. And I like witnesses like this because he's seen something before and he's seeing this, but it's 18 years in between. This is not somebody who's like, yeah, every night I go outside and there's a UFO outside my house and the aliens abduct me and they take me on all sorts of adventures, which sounds very cool, but he doesn't sound like somebody who's seeing UFOs constantly all the time. He's just noticing this light and it's weird and there's no noise. And again, not as impressive as the first two, but I do think it's interesting that there's no flashing lights, no noise, dead silent. And I've seen like things like this too, that sort of, they get very faint, but they're still there. And you're still not seeing any navigation lights. You're not hearing anything. And again, I'm a city boy. I'm in New York City, so it's never really quiet here. And you can hear the airplanes. And anytime I've been camping upstate, Connecticut, I've been to Gettysburg many, many times. And at night, it is very quiet. If there's a craft in the air, you're probably going to hear it. Even if it's very far away, you'll eventually hear that engine noise. So strange, just a white light, but people see these things all the time. And it does make you wonder that, a lot of people say, I've never seen anything, but how many times have they actually seen something and just thought it was a plane, thought it was a star? They see a white light and they look at it and say, oh, it's brighter than the other stars. And they go back in the house. We are a society these days that doesn't go outside and spend a lot of time outside. And it's kind of sad, but you do have people who do notice things and then say, that is weird. So I'm on the fence about this one, probably a conventional aircraft, but even the witness sort of says that. But they thought it was a little bit weird. So let us move on. All right, so here we have another interesting one. It's not as impressive as the first two. Most UFO sightings are not. But this one I picked for a reason. This one comes to us from January 30th of 1985. Again, about 9 p.m. Gettysburg, UFO, a light. And they say multiple times from the 80s to the 90s, I saw a light at night over Gettysburg battlefield. Made no sound, but it moved like a helicopter. Quite often in the 1980s to mid-90s, I believe primarily during the wintertime, January, February, after Christmas, I would see a light that looked kind of like a star, but not twinkling, and moved like a helicopter, odd directions, but was completely silent. This kind of thing would happen whenever I was in the Gettysburg battlefield at night looking toward the west. I don't really know how high this object was flying. I'd see it multiple times in multiple winters. Never said a word to anyone. I was maybe afraid for some weird reason. That's it. That's all. That's my story. Thank you. So very short story. And again, most skeptics would look at this without seeing the date and say, this is probably a drone. It's a little light. It's moving like a helicopter, sort of erratically, completely silent, which again, if a drone is far enough away, you may not hear it. I think you would. But this is 1985, to the early 90s. People were not flying drones, especially in the winter. Like he's saying, he only seen this in the winter. It was only the winter months, right after Christmas, January, February, and then nothing. But it was, multiple times over the years. And he was on the battlefield at night. And back then you were allowed to be. Nowadays you have to be off half hour after sunset. But back in the day, you were allowed on the battlefield till 10 p.m. at night. And he's saying this would be around 9 o'clock at night. But just seeing a weird light zipping through the sky and very strange. And I always say I hate to use one unknown to explain another unknown, but you have people on the battlefield who are ghost hunting and they see these lights and maybe they're thinking they're ghosts or orbs, and other people are seeing these things and thinking they're UFOs. And it's interesting to me, the psychology of it all, that people see things and their focus determines their reality. If they're out there ghost hunting, every light out there is going to be a ghost. And I'm not saying anybody would mistake this for a ghost. I'm just saying you have a lot of people out there saying they've seen weird things on the battlefield, and it just makes me wonder if they're out there ghost hunting and they see something weird, they're thinking ghost. They're not thinking UFO, because Gettysburg is not known for UFOs. They're thinking ghost. So very interesting. Again, nothing crazy. There's no, hyper detail here, but it's interesting because it sounds like a drone, but it couldn't have been a drone. And he's seeing it multiple times. Like there's a pattern, and I like to pay attention to patterns, because I think that's really where you get good data, and that's science, replicability. You have to replicate it. And if he's going out and he's saying, okay, every late December, January, February, there's these weird lights in the sky and it moves erratically and it makes no sound. Very interesting. So if anybody's in the Gettysburg area in January and wants to drive around at night and see if you see anything in the sky, might be a good thing to do, because this person saw some weird stuff in the sky. So wish there was more detail, but at least he mentions he was on the battlefield. I like that, because some of the other stories, not sure where they were when they saw these things. And Gettysburg is a small town, but the battlefields are huge. There's just a lot of land there. Then you could be any number of places. So very cool. All right. And one last story for this week. And, we're talking about ghost hunting. We're talking about ghost hunters and the paranormal. This comes to us from November 21st of 2003. This is about 9:30 at night, 10:30 at night. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Lights on an object that changed color. UFO sighting on a ghost tour in Gettysburg. My friends and I were on a ghost tour in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. What we saw was a light in the sky right below the constellation Orion. It was larger than a star and was blinking red, blue, green, and white. It was not moving, so it was not an airplane, and it was up too high to be any tower of any sort. So there are observation towers on the battlefield that you can walk up to and, oversee the battlefield. And there's like cool markings and informational plaques up there that sort of tell you what you're looking at and what happened. Very cool, very high. The night was calm and clear. There were 5 witnesses, including myself, 3 friends, and the tour guide, all of whom saw exactly what I described. We continued to see this light the entire way back to school from the tour. And New Fork, where I'm getting this information from, the National UFO Reporting Center, says it's a very good description of the star Sirius. It twinkles vividly. And I'm going to agree with that, because there are certain things in this story that bother me. One, they're saying it looked like a star, but it was larger. So you're talking about a bright star. It's blinking, twinkling, it's changing colors, red, blue, green, white. It's not moving. Most UFOs, you're going to see them move at some point if you're paying attention to it long enough. I mean, sometimes you look and it's there, and you blink and it's gone. I'll take that, but this is just, it's there. It was too high up to be a tower, so you're ruling that out. It's probably overhead. The night was calm and clear, so you're seeing lots of stars. We continued to see this light the entire way back to the school from the tour. So their whole time, they're not seeing this thing move. It's just in the sky. So you have Sirius, it twinkles. I don't know if that's what it was. I think that's a really good explanation, though. And I like including this story because it's a way to debunk certain things as well. Because like I said earlier, people will see stars, they'll see things they don't understand, and they say, oh, wow, this was a UFO. When in reality, it's just a very bright star. The previous story, he's saying it wasn't twinkling. He saw this light and it didn't twinkle. Planets don't twinkle, though. So, but the blinking, the red, blue, green, and that can be due to a number of things. Sometimes the stars, when they blink, they look like they're different colors. Atmospheric conditions can change the colors. Your perceptions can change the colors. Like I said, if you look at something for too long, it can start looking a little weird. The other thing, and I'm going to go into psychologist mode because I'm a psychologist, you have the paranormal on the brain. A lot of these previous encounters tonight, this guy taking out his trash, it's another guy changing a light bulb, it's another guy just on the battlefield. These are not people looking for ghosts, looking for the paranormal, looking for something spooky, looking to be scared. But you have ghost hunters out there, and most of the tours are not allowed on the battlefield. So you're in town, you're on the outskirts of town, you might be near the battlefield, uh, and you're with friends, and hey, let's do a ghost tour, and you're kind of revved up into this mode of let's see something spooky. We're going to tell spooky stories. You're heightened and hypersensitive to the spooky, and then you see this star that looks weird, and you're like, oh my god, maybe we're seeing UFO. I think the serious explanation is the best one. Seriously, sorry, but yeah, a good bit of debunking, and I appreciate when they do that on this site. Again, I think this is run by a much smaller group of people than like the BFRO, so the follow-up notes and follow-up investigations are far fewer and far between. And I wish there were more, but I do like this explanation. Even without that, I would have said this is probably a star. It doesn't move, it's twinkling, just sounds like a star. And for me, a UFO, you kind of need that movement. You need to say, yeah, it moved erratically. It moved in a way that a conventional aircraft can't, either way too fast or way too slow, or it was very low to the ground and made no noise. There's got to be something strange to it. And this just sounds like a star. So even if it really was an alien aircraft that they saw, we have to throw it out because there's nothing else to it that makes it seem strange. Just sounds like a star. So I'm going with star. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All right, everybody, I want to know what you guys think about these stories. The first couple were like really cool, like really strange craft that I can't really explain. I don't know what they might or might not be. The others are a little bit more ambiguous, like just white lights in the sky, which I've seen. And my son and I saw a white light when we were in Gettysburg back in April, late April. And, we're sitting on the porch one night and there's like this white light coming at us and it looked really strange. And then eventually it was like, oh, it's a plane. But you can see things in the sky, especially at night. You don't have the frame of reference. You don't have the visual acuity to see what these things are before, it's just a light. And when there's nothing else around, the sky is pitch black and it moves weirdly and it banks, you don't know it's banking. It may look like it's, maneuvering oddly, but it really isn't. So you got to be careful with the white lights in the sky, but they're still interesting. I think, the no noise and the moving erratically one, that one is interesting to me that he's seeing it only in the winter months. Very strange. The last one, yeah, I think it's a star. So let me know what you guys think about these down below. If you have stories you want to share with me, you want me to do a particular state, city, town, county, province, whatever, let me know. Jason at oddanduntold.com. I'm very happy to cover your stories for you. We have some more audience requests coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that's awesome. I look forward to those. And yeah, in the meantime, everybody, question everything. Like I said, we have to question these stories. These first two stories, were they military? Were they experimental aircraft? Were they extraterrestrial? Who knows? This last one, was it just the star Sirius or another star? It didn't have to be Sirius, but it could have just been another star or just something twinkling in the night. Doesn't sound like a UFO to me, but we have to question it. So yeah, until next time, everybody, embrace the weird, rock and roll, keep watching the skies, even over Gettysburg. Stop looking for ghosts. Look up once in a while. I was not frightened. This is going to be a bad edit.